Hi everyone, it's time to Nephis and chill, and I'll be treating this video as a sort of soft introduction to who I am and the incredibly hyped up upcoming MMORPG Ashes of Creation, particularly to those who may not know me from outside of the ESO sphere. Most people know me as Nephis, or you can call me Casper, and I'm a longtime MMO player that played all sorts of MMOs, including yes, Maple Story, and content creator as well. I am also a member of the official ESO stream team, former ESO class representative, and I've been playing ESO since beta. Next November 2023 will actually mark my personal 10 years of playing ESO straight without taking any breaks. I've done pretty much almost everything in ESO, including score pushing trials, endgame raiding, PvPing, selling carries, starting up large ESO Discord servers, role-playing, managing social guilds, organizing trade guilds, and a myriad of achievements that few players have gotten. So let's talk about Ashes. What is Ashes? Ashes of Creation is an upcoming MMORPG set in a world of high fantasy where players' choices will shape and define the world around them in so many different ways, much more than what your average MMO tells you on the box about how your questing choices will make an impact on some surface level matter. Whereas in reality, it's just like, okay, a line of dialogue. Ashes of Creation is basically going to be an open world MMO, with some calling it a sandpark MMO, being a mixture of a theme park and sandbox MMO with strong emphasis on player interactions, primarily in the form of PvP, with what seems to be complex systems such as naval warfare, trade, caravans, nodes, dozens of class configurations, reward concepts, and more, all packed into a huge world. And how huge are we talking about? The in-game world map was actually recently updated, according to developers, to be 1,200 square kilometers. 480 square kilometers is land, the remaining 750 is water, but apparently there will also be underground biomes. I've been keeping my eye on Ashes of Creation since about late 2016, before most of you even knew me, when the official website was but some concept art with the words caravan system slapped onto it. This caravan idea, though, stuck in my mind ever since because during this time, like many other ESO veterans, I was a bit disgruntled with the PvP in Zerodead, which was starting to face a lot more issues, including stagnation in terms of design, performance, and player retention. We would always talk about, in our small TeamSpeak servers, what we'd love to see ESO do for PvP, or really even PvE, as more and more of us migrated to becoming endgame PvEers. MMOs like Black Desert Online and recently New World were claimed by many of the same ESO players to be the new ESO killer, but every single time there was a new MMO or IP launch, I was one of the few who'd look at these games and firmly stick with ESO, not out of some sort of sunken cost fallacy feeling or even like weird fanboying to defend valid criticism of ESO, but because I truly did not think or believe those games or IPs were what I was truly looking for. One thing I've absolutely loved about ESO that seems to have diminished quite a bit lately was that they had a vision for the combat system and how it would integrate with what's basically an Elder Scrolls skin. Even if it was a vision I did not agree with, such as the E3 presentation of the Morrowind chapter in 2017, where the studio director basically said a lot of the game focus would be more on the casual, cyclical players, I could still respect that there was a vision, so I stuck with it. My problem with this vision, though, recently is that it's increasingly led to aggressive monetization, capitalizing off of the fact that ESO is the #1 moneymaker for ZeniMax Media, more than Fallout and Skyrim and whatever else combined. Recently, with the controversial and heavily communal destabilizing Update 35 and the expectation of the formulaic quarterly updates coming out in 2023 and onwards with ESO, my problem with the vision is not with the vision or some sort of philosophical game design behind these changes, but the appearance that there is no vision anymore from ESO's developers. I felt the same way actually about Black Desert Online, and especially New World, where while it did have some pretty cool systems, including the crafting and harvesting systems, my close observation of their development, their studio's philosophies, and changes to game direction told me that really the games over there seemed a bit too soulless or too corporate without much enthusiasm for some sort of vision. Or in the case of Final Fantasy XIV, I just simply didn't feel too much in terms of combat, despite having, that game having an excellent developer team with what seems to be an incredibly strong world building scene, and somewhat similar to ESO in general cases, a very friendly community. So, where does Ashes of Creation come in? I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Ashes of Creation is the World of Warcraft killer or the ESO killer or New World killer. I think there's enough space within the MMO market for all kinds of players to congregate to and enjoy of their own accord. One MMO doesn't necessarily have to upstage another to be successful, but when I look at Ashes Creations, their live streams, their development updates, their website for the past 5 or so years, I can sense and observe a strong, unwavering vision. Recently, one of my fellow ESO stream team members, Lucky Ghost, made an impactful video on the valid concerns he had for Ashes of Creation in terms of player griefing and the general open world PvP aspects, and following that video, I saw a lot of sentiment from a particular demographic of players who are stomping their feet and saying, I want to solo content and not interact with people, or this is an open world PvP MMO, it's doomed to fail. And I say to those people, deal with it. And I'm really happy to see Stephane Sheriff, the creative director and the initial funder of Ashes, stick to his guns and say, yeah, Ashes may not be for everyone, but that's fine. I think about all these MMOs, including ESO, that focus so heavily in pursuing maximization of profits by appeasing the toxic casual demographic who work 9 days a week, solo build, feeding their 5 kids Andy, who rage about the toxic elitists, and honestly, I feel kind of sad. It feels like when you start putting your time into your communities and your community's decision of gameplay or gameplay style happen to deviate away from the majority, you and yours are pretty much an outcast no matter what you say or do, and after a while, your home doesn't start to feel like a home. And this is right now what ESO has become for me and a lot of people. I think there's a large enough market out there actually of hardcore or semi-hardcore or even casual players who don't mind interacting with other people, who would absolutely love to immerse themselves into Ashes Creation and form strong communal relations with one another and create wonderful memories. First, let's talk about the graphics. I think the graphics in Ashes Creation so far look phenomenal, and this is pre-alpha. And one of the best decisions I think the Ashes development team has done so far is transitioning to the Unreal Engine 5, even though that would delay the game. And I think the game's graphics will be a big plus for me and many other graphics enthusiasts, because personally I couldn't get too far into World of Warcraft due to its blocky and cartoonish graphics. I did like RuneScape, but after a while it also made me go like, man, you know, throughout all the years of playing RuneScape, if only RuneScape had better graphics, it'd be even more popular than it is now. So yeah, I think I am definitely a stickler for graphics, and I think a lot of other people are. And seeing how beautiful the game could potentially be definitely has me excited. Let's talk about the Ashes of Creation combat system. There hasn't been a whole lot of info in terms of combat specifics, and this is going to be a big factor not just for me, but also for other people, especially ESO players, because ESO, despite its casual demographic, is ironically the highest skill ceiling MMO I've played in terms of combat, with its fluid 1GCD based combat system that also allows for animation cancelling. It just feels so good playing ESO's combat after playing around with Final Fantasy XIV, or Lineage 2, or even Guild Wars 2, which purportedly is the closest to ESO's combat system, although there's a bit more to it than that in my opinion. The mastery of the combat system in ESO, and the fact that players can still find out new things about how they could weave together everything they discover in ESO, is literally the most attractive part of ESO, which is why there's so much outcry and backlash whenever the developers try to change any aspect of the combat system. If you ask a longtime ESO player why they're still playing ESO today, there's going to be 2 answers. Number 1, their community. Number 2, combat. And that's it. Thankfully, Ashes of Creation seems to be going the middle road between tab and action combat systems, sort of like a hybrid. The animations, despite pre-alpha, look pretty solid, and the confirmation of animation cancelling as a skill play is definitely enticing to me. I'm not going to get into the classes system just yet in the video, but Ashes of Creation classes system is far beyond the 6-class system of the Elder Scrolls Online, with 64 different combinations of a primary and secondary class system. According to the creative director Stephane Sheriff, quote, we want there to be counterplay between the different classes. It's going to be a group-focused balance, where as long as you have the diversity of these classes present, that's going to be an equal level playing field, dependent on skill and strategy. End quote. This might sound really strange coming from me, supposedly an endgame toxic elitist raider in ESO, but I don't like how the meta in ESO is so narrowly restricted or defined to the point your groups only bring like primarily 2 or so classes to optimize for damage or something like that. I really want to see true diversity, even in endgame, not forced diversity in an MMO, because I think the accessibility of gameplay is really important when it comes to people's personal choices and enjoyment and what they can bring to group settings. Now let's talk about the lack of add-ons for Ashes Creation. This is going to sound even weirder because I'm an ESO player on PC, and console players on ESO don't get add-ons. But I love that Ashes Creation does not want to implement an open API for add-ons or mods like ESO or World of Warcraft do. While I enjoy the convenience and usefulness of the ESO add-ons, and I thank every day for our local add-on developers in the community, I firmly believe such convenience and usefulness offered from these add-ons should already be features in the game. So when Ashes, I think it was one live stream when Ashes was like, "Hey, we probably, we don't want add-ons," I was like, "Thank goodness." Currently, I'm primarily a PvE player in ESO. I raid, I sell carries for in-game gold, and I do whatever Raider is supposed to do. While I'm really excited for the open world PvP aspect, I'm also excited for the PvE system that comes with it in conjunction with the mayor system of towns and cities for Ashes Creation. Apparently, raids or dungeons will have difficulty scaling in Ashes. In ESO, we have 3 levels of difficulties for PvE: normal mode, veteran mode, and veteran hard mode. There is no in-between or easy transitional step between normal to veteran mode, or really even like overland stuff to veteran mode dungeon. And there certainly is a big chasm between veteran and hard mode, so I think the concept of difficulty scaling in Ashes with how well your raid team or group is doing in the dungeon and so on is phenomenal. And I think that's really great, and I'm really excited to see that even though it's a PvE system, it's still kind of intertwining with the PvP system in which your node location or the security of your node will actually determine your access to that dungeon. So I think there's a lot of really great player involvement concepts here that kind of push people to help one another despite their preference. And with ESO, there really isn't much of that. Let's talk about housing, because ESO is actually really well known and really good with its housing system. Unlike some other MMOs, and recently Final Fantasy XIV's Housing Crisis, ESO's instanced housing system is so freaking good. There are so many cool things you can do in ESO with housing and furnishings, it's insane. It's basically Minecraft, but in the Elder Scrolls universe. But it's missing some stuff I still feel like, especially with either player interactions or player usage. And I think Ashes Creation is leaning towards a housing system where it's both instanced and not instanced. The greatest part about the housing system in Ashes is that it's intricately linked with the node system. So if you want to keep your house and your city is under siege from other players, well, you better fight for it too. With ESO, there's a very clear disconnect between the consequences of player factions losing in Zerodead and other kind of players just sort of chilling about in the city or something, either oblivious to their faction losing a war or not caring because there simply isn't a consequence. And consequences, I think, here are a big part of Ashes Creation, it seems, and I'm all for that. And the fact that they want to let players grow stuff in their homesteads is pretty amazing if you ask me. Let's talk about crafting as well, because ESO's crafting system is both simple and also sort of like talked about because it kind of works directly with making furnishings for your house and upgrading your gear for raids and stuff like that. So speaking of consequences or importance of choice, especially the concept of crafting professions in Ashes Creation is something I really like when compared to ESO. So when I first started out in ESO, I was excited to invest into the provisioning skill line because my line of thought was, wow, I want to cook important foods and drinks to buff my raid teams or PvP groups to help them. And it was a bit disappointing for me to realize I could do all the crafting skill lines actually if I got enough skill points, and so could others. It sort of took away the need for you to really interact with other players or placing emphasis on the role of the players outside of the typical trinity of tanks, healers, and DPS. With Ashes though, it seems like you'll only be able to maximize or fully invest into one crafting profession above the others, which makes you even more enticing for groups to invite you in, even if you don't enjoy the open world PvP or combat aspect of Ashes. I know a lot of casual players in ESO that do want to get involved in groups or even in an environment by being a bard or something, but not be forced into a specific kind of gameplay style or be directly involved in specific gameplay, but still socialize and still be useful somehow to their friends. I think the crafting profession, housing system, caravan system, and the node system will provide a place contrary to what many are saying about Ashes being only for the hardcore. I think there will certainly be a place for people who are not as hardcore as me or other players. Another weird thing I want to bring up that I don't feel like a lot of people are bringing up right now is the sub to play feature, which I am all for. So in order to play Ashes of Creation, they want you to pay $15 a month. And while I can see some people are a bit put off by the sub to play feature or this kind of system instead of buy to play or free to play, I feel like this is kind of them saying, okay, I'm going to put our foot down and we don't want to chase profits potentially with a incredibly aggressive monetization kind of thing going on with the cash shop or anything like that, with free to play or buy to play. I also feel like that's also kind of a soft gate. I know it's not a completely impenetrable gate, but I think it's a soft gate against people who do harass other players in game. And I think depending on the MMO or game you come from, it is a real issue for a lot of people to just keep getting harassed by people just constantly making alt accounts, spamming alt accounts just to harass or stalk people. And while a sub is not necessarily gonna stop some people, I think it's definitely gonna deter a lot of the more immature people and also people who do lack the financial resources to keep making accounts and keep subbing of course. But this of course depends on how well the in-game moderation is, and that's kind of a different story in its own. And also I think subbing to play will also kind of give more of a solid metric, at least from the company end, to see how many people are actually playing the game without inflating the numbers. Let's talk about the development communication so far, or developers' communication to the player base. Stephane Sheriff has been treated by a lot of MMO players as sort of the MMO savior with his bold ideas, financial background of being a multimillionaire, and his frequent discussion of his longtime MMO gameplay. And I don't blame people for thinking that, because when I listen to this guy, I'm just like, man, he gets it. He understands what it's been like to get burned so much as a MMO player. He understands how certain monetization practices or certain game designs just absolutely suck. I mean, I was listening into Osmongold's interview of Sheriff on the phone a while back, and I found myself nodding and vibing to this guy's thoughts and statements about not liking loot crates, not liking pay to win or pay to convenience, or not liking RMT, and all these bunch of different cool things he said. And then I was like, I had to consciously check myself and ask myself, is this guy a con man? Because he's just hitting all these notes perfectly. It just feels like it's too good to be true in terms of the concepts and his ideas for the game. Thankfully though, it is legitimate. I've been keeping an eye on the development team, hiring a lot of experienced developers who had a hand in other products or places such as EverQuest, New World, PlatinumSide 2. I've seen developers who worked at Sony previously and elsewhere, and it's been said that if the game never comes out, they'll refund everybody, which I think, honestly, they say that, and I'm like, okay, yeah, they probably need to do that, honestly. But yeah, I think that there's certain level of trust that they built over their communications thus far. It's been a breath of fresh air for sure, with the developers often communicating via Twitter, Twitch streams, Discord, and even goddamn YouTube comments. Like, what MMO game dev even does that anymore? Go to some dude's YouTube video talking about their game, go to their comments and talk about their game. That's crazy. I haven't really seen much of that ever, if at all. I think that's the first time I've seen a game dev go to some concentrator's video and be like, hey, yeah, thanks for talking about the game, but here's what's really going on. And it's just been a really enjoyable experience so far with asking questions and getting answers, at least if you're not asking when Alpha 2 is coming out. I really like the Ashes of Creation moniker. I think there's definite symbolism in the name and the general concept of Ashes of Creation, which I'm sure the creative director is aware of. To me, Ashes presents sort of a last hurrah, last rally point for all the friends and great communities I've lost along the way to other games or MMO spaces. If Ashes, or when Ashes does come out, I feel like a big part of the attraction of the game to many of us, will be rekindling old relations with old friends as well, coming out of the ashes, and not just forming new bonds with new people, if that makes sense. I have a sense of longing, especially recently with how long I've been playing ESO, for just, to raid or PvP or simply play the same game with, my friends instead of just hanging out in the same Discord as them, or forcing myself to enjoy a different game just to hang out with them more. And I think there's a lot of you out there feeling like that, as I am. Obviously, I don't want to put all my eggs into one basket in terms of my hopes and dreams for the perfect MMO. I think when you look at Ashes of Creation, you should still be cautious and still critically examine the game rather than hopping onto the hype train and expecting every feature, every promised concept in your dreams to be fulfilled by the development team. I certainly don't want to be on copium or hopium. I just want to see the development of the game succeed, even partially, honestly, at this point. I still am on the precipice of, is this the next Star Citizen with all the feature creeps that they're promising at this point? Is Ashes gonna have a catastrophically awful launch like a lot of MMOs have? I don't know. And why I have actually put in the money, so you guys can tell me so if it doesn't pan out, for the beta and alpha 2 at this point in time, I think it'd be a financially sound decision for a lot of you who watch my videos to hold off until at least alpha 2 is over with, and for you to check out the gameplay at the very least. Furthermore, some of the stuff I've touched on in this video, like the general concepts of combat, crafting, and so forth, I still haven't seen too much yet about the little yet really important details, like what's inventory management gonna look like, how much of the material grinding is gonna be there, what about in-game moderation, and so on. There's still some big question marks I'd like to see by the time Alpha 2 or Beta 1 comes out for Ashes of Creation. I also hope that the fresh breath of air I talked about with the developer communicating with the player base and other cool things stick around after the game does launch. And it's not just a, hey, we want your money to make this game right now, so we're being really cool for now. And I'm not sure if anyone even really knows the true financial or finances of Intrepid Studios or the exact numbers, but I've heard a lot of different numbers from a lot of different people in a lot of different places, like, oh, Steven has put down $30 million of his own money into the game, or 10,000 players has put money into Alpha 2, so that's enough to fund and sustain an MMO. I truly hope that when push comes to shove and Intrepid Studios does need money, they don't do the same thing as other companies have done. They don't pursue the means of profit gain by doing what I talked about earlier on in this video about appeasing a large demographic to destroy their vision, essentially. But anyway, I'll be making a lot more Ashes of Creation videos and content. If you guys are familiar with the ESO University Discord server, which has over 20,000 people in it, and the ESO University website, we're actually doing something similar this time in partnership with Fear Turbo for Ashes of Creation with AshesAcademy.com and the Ashes Academy Discord server, which you can join from the links below in the description or comments. And the Ashes Academy will serve as a player hub of information, teaching, and resources for all Ashes of Creation players or people who just want to keep up with development news. If you want to keep up with both ESO and Ashes of Creation content with some funny YouTube shorts and memes, definitely subscribe to this channel to support us. Thank you guys so much for listening to my rambling, and I hope you have a great day, week, month, or whatever, wherever you may be. Stay safe, have fun, and see you guys next time.